How They Croaked by Georgia Bragg. Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is famous for his theory of evolution. He figured out that living things evolve over millions of years and that only the strongest survive. Unfortunately, he was one of the weaker ones. He was a sweet man, but he was anxious, constantly nauseated, and afraid to leave his house. He had it bad. If anyone came to see him, he would run behind a curtain and throw up. Darwin's biggest worry was about his theory of evolution. It went against religious beliefs of the time, and he knew it wouldn't go over as easy as, say, the theory of gravity. So he didn't tell a soul about it for 20 years, and keeping the biggest biological secret of all time made him sick as a dog until his heart couldn't take it anymore. As a boy, Darwin bagged beetles, collected crud off boat bottoms, and scraped moss from trees for fun. He kept lists of everything he shot, touched, and played, like his 2,795 wins at backgammon. His dad wanted him to quit staring at anthills and get a real job. Luckily for Darwin, at 22, his ship came in, along with his dream job. The British Royal Navy needed a naturalist, a person who studies plants or animals, on a 5-year surveying trip around the world aboard the HMS Beagle. Darwin was in heaven. Whenever they landed, he collected stuff. He sent home 5,436 specimens to study. But that expedition was the last outdoor adventure for Darwin. He went home and never left. Within a year of returning, Darwin had figured out that every species evolved from a single form of life. While he tried to prove it, he spent a lot of time upchucking, fretting, panting for air, farting, quivering, and avoiding people. Along the way, Darwin published pleasing nature books and on the sly wrote the most revolutionary ideas about life on Earth anyone had ever thought. He was a genius, but a few cards short of a full deck. He had all the aces, but he was low on the 7, 8s, and 9s. Darwin married his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood. People married first cousins back then without knowing better, but Darwin worried about the possible consequences. They spawned 10 offspring. 2 died as babies, 1 died at 10. 1 never talked, and 1 didn't move. Darwin's house was like a little hospital where Emma played head nurse. His survival of the fittest theory played out perfectly within his own family. Only 3 of his kids were able to reproduce. On the Origin of Species was published in 1859, and it sold out immediately. But the Victorian religious community was furious about his ideas, just as he had expected. For 50 years, Darwin suffered from nausea, headaches, dizziness, numbness, boils, eczema, palpitations, insomnia, depression, and gas. This is the short list, all of which he had logged in a daily health diary. The guy barfed after every meal and a few times every night. He tried everything to keep a meal down, including poisonous concoctions made with strychnine, which didn't help. Neither did bitter Indian ale, condies, ionized fluid, bismuth, opium, chalk, or carbonate of ammonia. His doctors looped battery-charged brass and zinc wires around his upper body and then splashed him with vinegar, but that didn't work either, not to mention the ugly marks it left all over his chest. After all else failed, Darwin forced himself to put away his microscope and leave his house to go to the famous Dr. Gully's water cure spa. There he was wrapped like a mummy in sopping wet sheets and laid out on a wooden board until the sheets dried hours later. Then they rubbed and slapped his body with towels until his skin glowed red. He had heat lamp baths to make him sweat like a pig and icy baths that froze his tail off. They aimed 650 gallons of freezing cold water at his spine and shot it through a narrow pipe. His legs erupted in boils. That was considered a sign of success. He called it his delightful water cure. Darwin didn't throw up for 30 whole days. But maybe he just felt better because his regular activities of leaning over a vat of formaldehyde, skinning dead ducks with his bare hands, or having stare-downs with stuffed squirrels came to a dead halt. For 50 years, Darwin inhaled the fumes of science and poked his fingers in everything. He didn't wear a mask or special gloves, and his work area wasn't ventilated properly. But his doctors never imagined that those things could have made him sick. The doctors couldn't find anything officially wrong with any part of him until he started having seizures. Aha! Finally, they knew something, but it was bad news. Blood to his heart was blocked. He had angina. There was nothing they could do. Darwin was an old man by then. Emma had made sure he stopped working. He logged his 4 millionth puke and noted his intestinal gas after dinner, as did his family. Darwin was going the way of all flesh, of all bug, reptile, and rhododendron. His clock was winding down, and the end was near. Darwin was evolving into a dead man. "I'm not the least afraid to die," he said. Darwin was sick, but he wanted to keep working. One day, he received in the mail from a fellow biologist a water beetle with a bivalve clam stuck to it, and he was excited. Emma finally agreed to let him go catalog his new specimen the day he felt good. A few days later, Darwin got into bed. Pain seized his chest. He was given brandy to kill the pain, but as with everything else, he had trouble keeping it down. The doctor arrived with a skin blistering mustard plaster that he put on Darwin's chest, a remedy that did not cut the mustard. There was nothing left to do. Poor Darwin. His chest pain was excruciating. He heaved and shuddered. His skin grew cold and took on a ghostly gray shade. Bright red blood came out of his mouth and ran down his white beard. Emma stayed with him. Had he been able, he may have wanted to write in his health diary. Emma rocked me in her arms. It was nice. I was tired. I died. Charles Darwin had a heart attack and died on April 19, 1882. He was 73 years old. Darwin wanted to be buried in the local graveyard next to his dead children. All controversy aside, his theory of evolution had made him a natural treasure. Government officials asked the family if they wished to bury Darwin in Westminster Abbey in London near Isaac Newton, the man who came up with the theory of gravity. It was an offer they couldn't refuse.